All right, welcome to yet another episode of the Women's Cricket Podcast. It's episode 38, and of course, this is the place where we talk about all things women's cricket. Neha, week two done and dusted of the Women's World Cup. We've seen some exciting games, least of all the one that we saw just last night. Unfortunately, maybe our side wasn't on the right side of the results, but surely these are the kind of games you want to see a lot more of.
Hi Akshay, once again, really happy to be here. Episode 38 of the TWCP. I mean, yeah, the World Cup's quite lived up to, the kind of expectations that we'd had, that, it'd be close matches. I mean, initially we had concerns that, hey, what if it's just absolute belters of, surfaces where you see a lot of runs on offer. But here you can clearly see, right, the team that is put to bat first ends up, just really struggling a lot. Then you have like this whole resurrection and then this whole redemption arc that happens in the second innings and teams really pulling off magical wins. So yeah, so far, although India was on the wrong side of the result from the match versus South Africa, you'd still take a lot of learnings and just be happy that at large women's cricket is delivering such contests, and the World Cup clearly is delivering, right?
100%, and like Hassan Ali said, kabhi win hai, kabhi learn hai. So chalo, let's hope that the Indian team also learn, and along with the Indian team, of course, each of the other sides also learn from whatever mishaps that have happened in the previous games. Lots to talk about, but unfortunately or fortunately, before the World Cup comes the WPL, not just for us, but even in terms of updates, because we've had a major update coming in, Neha. A couple of days ago, we saw reports floating around that, potentially we might see a mega auction. And then on Thursday, we saw ESPN Cricket for confirm that yes, we will be seeing a mega auction this time around, which means each of the five teams will be able to retain only five of their players. And the slabs have also been announced. Player 1 at 3.5, Player 2 at 2.5, Player 3 at 1.75, Player 4 at 1, and of course the fifth player can only be an uncapped player who would be retained at 50 lakhs. Of course the other four players, the numbers quoted are in crores in case someone gets confused. But Neha, five players to be retained, a mega auction is scheduled to happen in what, a month and a half. What do you make of that?
Yeah, honestly, didn't see this one coming, Akshay. I think it's all happening all at once, right? Right now, the frenzy is all about the World Cup, and suddenly we see a bunch of these WPL updates, come to life. A tad surprised there, with the kind of guidelines that the BCCI wants to go in with, where a team can retain up to what, three Indian cap players, and you can have two overseas players. And again, it's a mega auction, right? Which means teams will really have to dig deep and kind of, reconfigure and get a lot of things, right? I think the report also sort of suggested that the teams, namely RCB, Delhi, Mumbai, were in the favor of not having a mega auction, but other teams, as UP Warriors and Gujarat, sort of wanted it. So, it could be much more of a level playing field. They could get in the right kind of players as well. I'd say it's still an interesting move, but the fact that, I mean, it's a mega auction, you're getting to retain like almost up to five players. It means like almost half of your playing 11 is sorted there. It's like just the rebuilding phase for a lot of these teams will be, a frustrating process. I think right now with the senior women's T20 trophy, the elite and the plate division that's happening right now, I think the teams will, possibly use that as notes, for scouting and to actually sort of build their teams. And also the past seasons of the WPL have given enough reasons for teams to, sort of decide what their options are. So I'd just say, for the lack of a better word, interesting, Akshay. I didn't really see a mega auction, without the inclusion of a new team coming in. But yeah, this is just another case of them trying to, I don't know, amp up the league and BCCI doing BCCI things.
Yeah, the last point that you mentioned, that's what surprised me because I was genuinely of the opinion that the next time we see a mega auction would be when a new team would be introduced to the tournament because, we sort of, off the record, we also did like a mock auction where, we saw a seven-team auction happen and we clearly saw that there are enough talents that could be distributed across each of these seven sides. And it is genuinely a tad bit surprising that, BCCI, against, all other popular notions, they have gone ahead with a mega auction with the same five teams, which means we will be seeing, these five teams only for the next auction cycle as well. So that's a minimum period of 3 years. That's a bit sad because I remember when WPL was launched in late 2022, there was clarity given to the potential bidders that in 2026 we will introduce a six team and potentially by 2028 we would want to try and expand it to an eight-team tournament. Those were the conversations having that were being had then. Clearly, that won't be happening anytime soon now, considering this development. And also, like you mentioned, like the report mentioned, both, of course. RCB, Delhi, Mumbai were the three sides who were reluctant, understandably so, because they'd built such a strong nucleus, and all these three sides were very successful in their own right. RCB winning a title, Mumbai winning two, Delhi being a part of each of the three finals. So clearly, they were very bullish about, the kind of talents they had at their disposal. So GG and UP Warriors would have rightly wanted, some sort of a mega auction to just allow them to, get a bit more of an equitable distribution. But once again, they are the ones to be blamed. It's not like in the previous auction they had their hands tied or something. But then my question is, if the objective of the mega auction is to redistribute the talents and make each of the five strongs roughly equally strong, five retentions, Neha, do you think that serves the purpose? Because each of the top sides are going to retain five of their best talents, and that leaves what? Practically crumbs for the other two.
Absolutely, Akshay. I think just going back to the point that I was discussing, that it quite literally defeats the purpose itself, right? The fact that you have five retentions, that's almost like half your playing 11 sorted there with your retentions. And teams would obviously want to go in with players they really bank on, who are, the face of the franchise and have actually delivered time and again. So yeah, I'm not sure again how that's going to sort of, make it, as you said, equitable, or just have the talent being distributed across all fronts. You will see some teams sort of struggle there, as they would want certain players, but they're already, being retained by their respective franchises. So just a little puzzled as to what it was. But now, actually, I think it'll be interesting to see what's the strategy most of the franchisees sort of adopt, right? Because take the case of RCB itself, not going in that direction entirely. They've had a few injuries. They would probably, want to reevaluate some of their options. So I think now I'm going to be interested to see how the franchisees sort of leverage this, because the more you retain, your purse size keeps getting smaller. So I think that aspect is something. The auction dynamics is really going to come into play and make it quite interesting.
Yeah, and another thing, to be honest, that BCCI did not seem to have thought much about was the purse size itself. In the 2023 or the maiden WPL auction, we saw what each of the teams having a purse size of 12 crores, and it's only gone up by 25% in the last 3 years, and they've decided to stick to the 15 crore purse that was awarded to each of these sides last year. So once again, begs the question. There's hardly been any growth in the purse size, which means there's only that much money that you can spend, which means like a Smriti Mandana, if she does get retained, in all likelihood she will, at the highest slab, 3.5 crores versus the 3.5 3.4 crores winning bid that she received in 2023, makes you wonder. 3 years you would expect a bit more of a steeper growth in some sense, so that also was a tad bit surprising. The ratio between the amount of purse you would lose for your retentions vis-a-vis the total purse size, I thought that was pretty much in line with what we've seen in the IPL as well. We saw last IPL's mega auction, see retentions worth up to 79 crores available to sides, which is roughly what, 65% if I'm not wrong, and the number stands at 61% for the WPL, 9.25 out of 15. So that way, in terms of purse deduction for the retentions, they seem on point, but in general, they could have probably increased the purse size. And last but not the least, not just the fact that this is a very short turnaround time between the announcement and the scheduling of the auction, there's a World Cup going on. We know Luke Williams is associated with the English side right now during the World Cup. Right after the World Cup is the WBBL, which starts on the 8th of November. We know that Luke Williams will be associated with the Adelaide Strikers. We know Lisa Keightley will be associated with the Sydney Thunder. We know Jonathan Batty would be associated with the Melbourne Stars. So that's three of your coaches who would be busy with other commitments, making you wonder once again, how are they going to find the time to strategize, to talk? Because I'm pretty sure Smriti Mandana in the middle of the World Cup would not want to talk to Luke Williams, who is the coach of another side, about WPL retentions. I mean, as much as we love the tournament, but it's the World Cup for buzz sake. So that was very surprising. And yeah, I mean, yeah, it's a bit too last minute. I'm not sure why this call has been taken, and if it were, why was it taken so late? Some might argue that, what, the likes of Smriti Mandana were talking about a mega auction about 2-3 months ago itself in July. There were reports coming out even then, but again, those were reports. It's one thing to see reports coming out, it's a completely different thing to have a confirmed notification by BCCI. And yeah, I don't know what to make of it. All this means is there's going to be a lot more chaos, and I'm all for chaos. I'm all for auction. So that way, the auction nerd geek in me is definitely looking forward to this. So let's see how this pans out. We will, of course, go a lot more in depth. When it comes to retentions, the kind of players we might see retained, released, what strategies could each of these teams go about. We'll discuss this a lot more in depth post the World Cup, of course, because coming back, this is a World Cup weekly wrap. At least that's what we wanted the episode to be, if not for this update. So coming swiftly to the World Cup, Neha, we've seen a bunch of things happen, but of course, we cannot start without this one major talking point, which is the umpiring howlers, Neha, game in, game out. The kind of decisions we've seen, be it Heather Knight getting those reprieves, be it even Richa Ghosh's no ball yesterday, or even Suneli's dismissal or potential not dismissal, however you want to put it. There have been a how do you put this? I want to say a bunch of really bad decisions and really go after the umpires, but we have to cut them some slack somewhere.
Yeah, actually, I think this is a tricky one there because certainly I think we've seen a lot of appalling decisions, on display. I think all across, social media, a lot of fan forums, you can see a lot of hate and abuse, being hurled at these umpires, which is very unfair. And the whole gender aspect, that's sort of brought into place that, hey, it's a woman umpire. That's why, she's making certain decisions. But what a lot of people don't understand is that I think it's such an important move to, include women umpires first up, to have an all women umpiring panel. But I also believe that proper training, having them feature in a lot more bilateral tours, a tours, and just having that level of professionalism would definitely help. And that would probably aid a lot of the decision making, because this time you can really see the inexperience, the whole fact that you have to keep revisiting the law book to see what is actually happening. This has been very disappointing. Again, this is not coming from an India fan perspective, but at large, when you look at it for it from the other team's perspective as well, just the kind of decisions, right? Yeah, it really makes you think like what is seriously going wrong there. But I would just like to conclude by saying that it's very unfair that abuse is being directed. Like, you can always disagree with the decision, but the kind of route that some fans are using is yeah, it's pretty much crossing the line and very unfortunate.
I would actually go one step further and say that you can even criticize the umpires. It's not that they aren't subject to criticism or they cannot be criticized, but the fact that all of this criticism or most of the criticism is on their agenda, on their personal life, and not all about the decision itself, and that's what has, of course, even bugged me. And that's where, like Neha mentioned, I will have to cut them some slack because it's not entirely their fault that they are at this stage. If let's say tomorrow Neha or I or any of you viewers, if you are made, an umpire of, an ICC event, then it does not mean you're at fault for each of the incorrect decisions because you're not equipped. And that's where we are coming from. What we're trying to say is because these umpires haven't been equipped enough to handle such situations, especially at the biggest stage of women's cricket, it is naturally going to be a bit more daunting, a bit more overwhelming. And that's why probably the urge to just stick to the last letter of the rule book and just sort of being very stubborn with it. It's really costed some teams. Bangladesh, for instance, I mean, that was a very clear misunderstanding of decisions or a misinterpretation of decisions because you could see Gayatri Venugopalan, the third umpire on that day, talking about on air, at least on record, talking about how because there's no conclusive evidence, she has overturned the decision in the batter's favor. So you could understand that she was under the impression that in case of inconclusive evidence, the decision or the benefit of doubt would go to the batter. But on the other hand, we know that it's very clearly laid out in the rule book that in case of inconclusive evidence, the on-field decision would be retained. Simple as that, irrespective of whether it's out or not out. And that was definitely a big, big, big red flag. I mean, because there's no sort of coming back from that. You can't defend it. It was completely wrong. It was an incorrect understanding or interpretation of the decision. But when it comes to say Suneli, so when it comes to say Richa Ghosh, they were sticking to what the rule book says. With Suneli's, that was barely a murmur. That was nothing. I mean, like if someone had sneezed in the audience, you would have probably seen that much of a spike. That's how little it was. But clearly the umpires weren't taking any chance. They saw a tiny bit of a spike when the bat was close to the ball. They just went ahead with it. So that was once again a bit too unfortunate, but thankfully it didn't cost India so much because Sunil was out the very next over. And similar was the case with Richa Ghosh. You could very clearly see that's a Zaba waistline, and that's where technology like this, as much as I love using technology when it comes to umpiring decisions because it makes everything a lot more objective, the technology isn't there yet. You could clearly see it's visually visible that the ball is above Richa Ghosh's waistline, but just because the trajectory showed that it was going below her waist, that was once again another decision one that I would blame the umpires for. This is more down to the technology, and we've seen several such decisions being made even during the IPL and the WPL, where a lot of criticism, rightfully so, was laid out. What on earth is this technology? So either it is also about us getting used to, this now slowly going to be the norm going forward. So maybe that's also there. So hopefully that it'll be normalized a lot more sooner. But yeah, with certain umpires, let's hope that, they get a lot more better at this as soon as possible, because there's no other way. It is a case of survival of the fittest. So there's no way going about it. And that's where lastly, probably, what do you make of Jared Kimber's thoughts? And he probably brought this up a while back. It's not even something recent, Neha, about having specialist TV umpires and specialist on-field umpires, because Gayatri, in her defense, Gayatri Venugopalan, she's been a fairly decent on-field umpire, and maybe that's where she's a lot more suited to. So why not train umpires for being a designated third umpire, instead of sort of training everyone and everything and just rotating them around whenever possible?
Absolutely, actually. I think I definitely see some merit in this argument of having, specialist umpires, because this way I think each person can stick to their strength and do what they can possibly execute best. And there's no hierarchy in that, right? That, oh, you're just a third umpire, so it's not as important as being an on field umpire. So I definitely subscribe to that. And hopefully, in the future, we get to see the infusion of that. And also, just to bring in this aspect of AI itself, right? I hope there's no point where, AI completely replaces all of your human umpires and that becomes the norm and the reality. Because I think there's going to be a time when, people are going to be very frustrated with like human umpires and be like, yeah, let's, just scrap this and have AI umpires. So yeah, I'm just hoping that's never the situation. I hope a lot more umpires are trained, given the right kind of exposure, and we should cut them some slack. At the end of the day, they are human. That's what makes the game beautiful. Sometimes, yeah, it goes in your favor. Sometimes it goes against. But yes, specialist umpires is probably the next important step. And hopefully the use of AI, in a better way is definitely the need of the hour.
And last but not the least, let's hope that we see fewer of such howlers going forward, because we want the conversation during the World Cup to be around the World Cup and not about all of these things. And unfortunately, it's taken a lot of, it's sort of stolen the thunder of the World Cup itself. And that's very sad, very unfortunate. So fingers crossed, this is the last such conversation we have for the rest of the World Cup. But that was that when it came to the umpiring bit. Lots more to talk about, of course. Next up, Neha, another trend that we have been seeing is teams and the way they've batted first so far, Neha. Like, what, 10 games in, and teams batting first. Why have they been struggling so much?
I think rightly picked there, Akshay. This whole trend of teams batting first clearly seems to be the norm. I mean, teams are winning the toss; they are opting to bat first, but clearly, man, they're actually struggling with the conditions. I think it just throws light on the kind of conditions that are on offer, right? I think pre-World Cup, all of our discussions were around that India-Australia series, how they were absolute belters of surfaces, so much runs on offer, batters just running away with the game. But this time around, yeah, to see the bowlers have something, some purchase from the surface has been quite a pleasant sight, I'd say. I think for a lot of cricket purists, they would be happy, to see that there is some. I don't know, offer on the surface there for the bowlers. But I think a lot of teams, right? This is not just an India specific pattern. You see the likes of England, Australia, all of them, seem to struggle. No team has, stitched up that massive partnership and then gone on to, make it big. It's all been rescue acts by the lower middle order, just bailing them out of trouble, which clearly goes to show that I think most of the teams are not used to playing in these sort of conditions. And also, some venues are facing the whole aspect of the weather, going south and like it raining so much. So yeah, just a lot of these aspects to also take into account. And although this is a home World Cup, the women's team, like the Indian women's team themselves, is playing like first time, right, in so many of these venues. So I think that's also another pertinent point to talk about.
Definitely, and you hit the nail on the head when it came to the surfaces itself, because pre-tournament, even when we did the preview, when we spoke to each of our guests, everyone were vocal about the fact that we'll be seeing a lot more boundaries. The surfaces are expected to be belters. We'll be seeing so many runs. But unfortunately, that's not panned out that way. I mean, okay, unfortunately for the batters, fortunately for the bowlers, we've not seen it pan out that way. And just look at the chart over here, right? When you see run rates and the way they've progressed across the last 4 years, which is the last ODI cycle, the beginning of the last ODI cycle, of course, 2022, runs were scored at 4.67 per over. Then next year it went up to 4.72 runs per over, 4.74 last year, and for the first time ever in the history of women's cricket, we saw the 5 runs per over mark being breached, and which is why we were, expecting something similar to happen, a lot more runs, a lot more boundaries, but that's hardly been the case. The run rate so far in the tournament has been at 4.6, which is below what it was at in 2022. which just goes on to show, the kind of difficulty that batters have faced, how much more easier it has been for bowlers. In fact, when you look at average, which is a lot more sort of, which is a much better indicator of how the bowlers have fared, the average right now is at 23.9. The first time it's dipped below 24 in the last 5 years. This once again going on to show how difficult it's been for batters. The conditions have definitely been anything but batter friendly, and that's where a lot of these batters have been found wanting, because in their heads, a lot of them, Guwahati, Vizag, Indore, they've historically been batter friendly surfaces. They've expected something like that, but it's hardly been that way. Which is why they've just gone ahead with their shots. They've fallen through. First couple of games, they probably have taken some time trying to gauge the surfaces. So hopefully going forward, we'll see these numbers improve. But that's played a very big role in why batters have struggled. And of course, talking about the top three and the way they've struggled across teams, I don't think there's one side or two sides should be blamed. Every side's top three has struggled, barring one, which is England, which again is a bit of an outlier because in their first game versus South Africa, they were chasing just 70. They had hardly any pressure, which is why the openers found it a lot more easier to just pace their innings. But when you look at these numbers as well, only one side's top three has scored at a strike rate of over 90 in the World Cup so far, and that's Australia. And no other side has even scored above 80. That just once again goes on to show the gulf between Australia and the rest of the sides. Australia's top three striking at 91, and the next best side is South Africa at 79. Once again, the chart is there, the numbers are there for everyone to see. And then when you look at the averages, New Zealand 14.5, Pakistan 16.5, Bangladesh 20, Sri Lanka 22, Australia 28. Just the numbers are there. Like, unfortunately, the top three have been struggling. The new balls wreaked a lot more havoc than intended. So, in some sense, I am happy. I'm always happy to see bowlers do well, but it's clearly not been as batter friendly as expected, and that's definitely played a role in why so many of these batters have struggled so far. Hopefully, teams would now be a lot more mindful of how the conditions have been, and accordingly sort of recalibrate their strategies and their approach importantly for to each of these games. India next play Australia in Vizag. We saw what happened there in the last game versus South Africa. So you need to understand. Same goes for Australia because their top three versus Pakistan versus New Zealand. They've hardly fared. They've hardly scored runs. So definitely the onus will be on them to do well, and let us see whether that actually turns out or not. But of course, batting say thoda, let us now talk about the subcontinent teams, Neha, and the way they've performed. Sri Lanka versus India, Bangladesh versus England, and then Pakistan versus Australia. Each of the big three teams have been given a very tough fight by each of these other three sides.
Yeah, Akshay, spot on there. And it's really a pleasant sight, right? Because when you look at the top big three, that is the likes of India, England, and Australia, it's almost like, it's a big girls' party. They just play amongst each other here and there. They play against the other teams. So that's when, the likes of England and Australia, when they play against the other subcontinent teams, you really get to see them being challenged, right? I think the Australia versus Pakistan match is something that will just go down in the annals of history for being such an iconic match. Australia, the way they kind of, pull themselves out of trouble, being 7 wickets down to actually push to that 221. I think, again, we can dedicate an entire episode to just discuss about that heroic effort. But the fact that Pakistan was really able to, not just push the door, but actually break open the door and get Australia in that position was, I think, commendable. For the lack of a better word, I'm going to use commendable there. And who knows, right, where they could have probably restricted Australia and actually chased it down. Pakistan, again, has other concerns with their batting side of things, and that clearly didn't happen. But the other interesting match was the Bangladesh versus England match too, right? Bangladesh was clearly struggling to score a lot of runs. Credits there to the way England was bowling. But then, yeah, they didn't make that, chase of 180 that simple, right? They really, really challenged England. It required a Heather Knight, sort of be that knight in shining armor to get them, just bail them out of trouble. But the way Bangladesh bowled, I think they've saved a few of those, amazing performances for later. But then it just shows you the grit and resilience, right? I think Nigar Sultana Jyoti in her, interaction with the broadcaster as well had spoken about how her team doesn't get to play, the big wigs as often as they'd like. And this will serve as, an opportunity to sort of do the unthinkable, or, to actually perform well and show what they're made of. So, yeah, it's matches like this, right, that you obviously live for. And I think in the past week too, right, we had that one match abandoned, the Sri Lanka Australia match, and I for one was really looking forward to seeing this, to see how Sri Lanka would really push the buttons of Australia, challenge them in those conditions. Because you see, I think Cricket Australia release a lot of like these podcasts with their players and them talking about how these conditions in Sri Lanka are proving to be a massive challenge. So it would have again been a real test of their grit in these Sri Lankan conditions. So, I mean, just yeah, it's really, really refreshing to see the subcontinent sides really, punch above their weight and actually challenge the bigger nations. But the only hope and prayer is that it paves the way for a lot more bilateral cricket. Just start those A tours. I think recently we saw Sri Lanka under 19 play, Australia under 19, and the Sri Lankan under 19 side absolutely decimated and dominated, which is things you want to see more often, right? So if kind of spirals even to like senior grade cricket, that would be amazing, and hopefully a World Cup like this would sort of open the pathways for a team like Bangladesh that absolutely deserves a lot more bilateral cricket.
Yeah, if I'm not wrong, Bangladesh also scheduled to play India right after the World Cup. So hopefully we will see them play a lot more games. Each of these sides deserve that, and that's where I'm hoping the ODI championship cycle to sort of, pave the way for that going forward at least. So fingers crossed, and I completely agree with you. With each of these sides, the way they've played, Australia, Pakistan, in all likelihood for me was the most lopsided contest of the tournament because with each of the other sides, you could say, yeah, you know what, there's something here, there's something there. With Pakistan and Australia, just the way they stack the stack up, of course, Australia batters are extremely adept against spin, and Pakistan were only going to rely upon the spinners. But for them to even them 75 for 7 later, 115 for 8, they were on the brink of a historic win. But of course, Beth, Mooney, Australia, they're like, wait a minute, hold my beer and hold that thought. We'll get the game done and dusted. So was a tad bit unfortunate, but 100% a lot of positives for the Pakistani side, for the Bangladeshi side. If not for those umpiring howlers, in all likelihood, Bangladesh would have defeated England, and that would have been such a win. It would have been a win for the ages, and importantly, it would have almost made my prediction right because just last week I spoke about how this Bangla bowling attack is definitely one to watch out for. Nahida, Marufa, Fahima, three of them are striking really well right now. Last game we saw Sanjita do well. Hopefully, Shaurna Akhtar and all of them can also just chip in and put their hand up. Rabia Khan, we've not seen a lot of her antiques with the ball yet. So when all of them come up with a cohesive performance, there's no reason why that batting lineup cannot take them over the line. Because make no mistake, Nigar Sultana Jyoti got out for a duck. And despite that, England were pushed to the brink. And that's what Nigar Sultana Jyoti herself has been talking about. She's been talking about how she wants her side to be less dependent on her. Sure, she might be the best batter, she might be the most important player, but if they are able to eke out wins without her contributing, I mean, just think of that, yeah. Just think of what that would mean for the side and the youngsters, importantly. So definitely lots to look forward to, and there's so many such games coming up. Bangladesh will be taking on India, Sri Lanka will be taking on the likes of England later. Oh man, I'm genuinely excited for that. So fingers crossed that so-called upset is not too far away. That's all. I'll just leave it at that note. And yeah, let's talk about the next topic, of course. We spoke about the top three earlier and you know how they've been struggling. But one batting group or batters group that's not struggled so far, Neha, has to be the tail. Yeah, like the way each of these tailenders or so-called tailenders, once again, no disrespect to any of them. I don't think you can call them tailenders, but just the way each of these teams' tails have whacked consistently. Oh my goodness, we again did not see that coming.
Absolutely did not see that coming. And I think we're all seated here, actually, just to see, the lower middle order sort of bail their team out of trouble. I think it also throws light on just the complexion of the team, right? How most of them are trying to keep their batting really deep. I think for Australia at this point, we'd be just repeating ourselves because of the kind of batting depth they have. But even for the other teams, right, you have India doing very India things, I think, experimenting at a World Cup, bringing in Richa Ghosh at a 7 and an 8. You have Nadine Declerk coming in at, 8 there for South Africa, which I don't know. Like it feels like these are good batters. You'd want to see them come up earlier, but the way they've been sort of holding their own and actually delivering, right, breaking records left, right, and center, and actually giving their team reasons to not just be proud of them, but to also put up a fight there and have something on the board to defend. I think that's been a very very interesting trend this World Cup. We saw it in that Australia Pakistan match as well. Alana King, coming in at 10, scoring her 50 there. In the other match, we saw Charlie Dean sort of do that, just hold her ground when Heather Knight was batting on and, getting those runs. Just, yeah, I think now, the value of all-rounders and just having your tailenders chip in with the bat has become all the more important, right? Probably this World Cup has highlighted that all the more when you see, the top order and the middle order sort of struggle. And yeah, your lower middle order just showing how it's done. And I think, yeah, that definitely has to be like a very big talking point and hopefully something that we will talk about even as the World Cup ends.
Yeah, it definitely has been a very interesting trend, Neha, and definitely one that I did not see coming. I definitely did not have it on my bingo card for sure. I mean, look at the instances, and that's where the graphic helps us out. Just look at each of the entry points of those players from number 8 or below, and look at what the exit point is at. This is going on to show that gone are the days where 120 for 6, 130 for 7, 115 for 8. Positions like these meant that, you know what, the batting side is out of the game, the bowlers can just go home. Done. That's not been the case this World Cup. Alana King, Richa Ghosh versus South Africa, Alana King versus Pakistan, Rabia Khan versus England. That was such an impactful cameo from Kim Garth versus New Zealand. Such an important knock. And then, of course, Amanjot Kaur and Sneerana versus Pakistan versus Sri Lanka. Just once again, important cameos, important knocks, and just going on to show that wait a minute, the tails aren't here just to bag, they are here to prove something to each of the other batters, and it's been fantastic to watch, man. And hopefully, we will see more such performances because that just means that the bowling side is not completely done and dusted with the game till each of the 10 wickets are picked. And it's definitely a lesson that the Pakistani side would have learnt the hard way. Alright, we've spoken about a bunch of things so far. We've spoken about the WPL, we've spoken about the World Cup, the kind of trends we've seen, the way the teams have performed. Time for us to now shed some light on some of the lesser known performances we've seen in the last week. Neha, who do we have first up?
Yeah, for me, Akshay, it's almost a no-brainer. It has to be Alana King. I think her performance, right, versus Pakistan absolutely takes the cake. Coming in at 10, where there's not a lot of expectation on you, but then I think the way she just, went about her innings, took her time, dug in deep there, and later just started accelerating, right, with those boundaries. In fact, she had probably the best strike rate there in that entire, Aussie chart with the strike rate almost touching 105. I think even Beth Mooney, right, in the interaction with the broadcaster, did mention that just seeing her at the other end, just swing the bat like that, score runs for fun with a smile on her face. It's impossible, to not sort of appreciate that sort of an effort, and then to later, come back and actually bowl well for Australia as well. Like, she bowled, I think, six overs, just gave away like 19 runs or so, took a wicket too. So it was quite the heartening, effort. And you'd love to see more of this. And I think Alana King, the batter, is definitely very underestimated. I also vaguely remember an entire discussion about, how Australia is just able to make so much of their talent and just, have them deliver time and again, the kind of exposure they have to situations that, yeah, you'd see more often than not, innings like this sort of come through. So I think Alana King definitely has to be my first pick.
Fair enough. I mean, that was a phenomenal performance coming in at number 10 and scoring her maiden ODI half century. So it was fantastic to watch that. Second name for me, of course, it has to be Chloe Tryon. Yeah, like fantastic all-round performance. If it wasn't enough that she picked 3 wickets with the ball in the first innings, the way she came back and fought tooth and neck for her side with the bat in hand at number 7, fantastic knock of 49 of 64 balls. That was a brilliant performance from her. Firstly, I mean the kind of wickets she picked up. Yeah, she picked up the skipper Harmanpreet Kaur. She picked up Jemmy's wicket. Two crucial cogs in the wheel for the Indian team in the middle order, especially. And yeah, after that, with the bat, the way the South African side was struggling, it seemed down and out in all fairness. What, less than 100 for 5? You're chasing 250 plus. It's a packed stadium. The crowds are going against you. And for her and Nadine to Klerk to stitch that partnership together. So it was great to watch. Showed a lot of application over there. I mean, the way she went about her business, we've always associated Chloe Tryon, with her attacking intent, with, scoring boundaries and that flair that she has for that attacking stroke play. We saw none of that. She shed all of it because she knew what the situation demanded, which is why there were hardly any boundaries scored. She took her time, she ensured that she absorbed the pressure first, and then when there came time to cut loose did she. So that was fantastic to watch. And once again, this goes a long way for South Africa too, because you know Laura Wolfart, you know Tasman Brits, you know Marizan Cup, you know that they will always be there and thereabouts when it comes to performances with the bat. And now to see the likes of Chloe Tryon and even Nadine de Klerk for that matter, like all of them also chipping, that just means that you know what, they are peaking at the right time. Now it's all about whether they can go the distance. And fingers crossed, I'm all for seeing first time winners, so hopefully we'll see one of those. But yeah, that was a performance to remember.
And yeah, for me, next on the list has to be Charlie Dean, right? I think her very gritty performance versus Bangladesh definitely deserves a mention. I know when we, look at the Bangladesh versus England match, a lot of the focus does go on, Heather Knight, the way, she sort of went about her innings. But I think it's those silent, unsung heroes. And I think for me, one was Charlie Dean from that match. I think she batted almost 56 balls, scored those 27 runs, was playing just excellent second fiddle right there to Heather Knight. And the way she just went about, the rest of the batters were just trying to play the most like ridiculous shots, but this is Charlie Dean that was just trying to hold her and just give the strike to Heather Knight and see where it went. I think it's just the runs may not be a lot, but small contributions like this, right, that really helps because at that point, Bangladesh just couldn't get any more wickets. It was two set batters just going in, going through the motion, so to say, to sort of just get to chasing that total. And even with the ball, right, earlier in the day, she bowled such a miserly spell. Those 10 overs, giving away just 28 runs. You're picking two crucial wickets as well. So I think, yeah, for Charlie Dean, it was that sort of a day, where everything just sort of went right and England really benefited from her sort of doing well. And also all the calls that were like, why is she getting picked ahead of Sarah Glenn also sort of getting answered in a way. So yeah, big ups to Charlie Dean for that performance.
Yeah, next up has to be the Bangla youngster for me. I know it's not Maruf Akhtar. It is Rabia Khan. And yeah, her performance in general, Bangladesh's performance, just the way they've all gone about their business, Once again, with Bangladesh as well, we always knew there's Nagar Sultana Jyoti, there's Maruf Akhtar, but what next? We've seen so many players do well for them. I mean, they've had two 50 scorers so far in the tournament, and neither of them are Nagar Sultana Jyoti. We saw Rubia Haider, we then saw Sobna Mostri. So it's good to see performances coming up and lower down the order, of course, coming in at number 8, Rabia Khan. What a knock, man. What a knock. Your team's practically done and dusted. We all were just trying to make sense of what have we seen so far from the Bangla side? 130 for 8, 40 odd overs done. It seemed like this innings was going nowhere. Everyone just seemed keen on just playing the deliveries, and even if they were dots, they were fine with it. And then in came the youngster, man, known for her leg spin ability, and then the way she took on each of the English bowlers, or that six that she hit of Alice Capsey, what a mighty blow that was. And yeah, you needed that intent. We've been speaking about how Sharmeen Akhtar Shupta could be that one person the Bangladeshi side can rely upon. And now when you see Rabia Khan do what she did the other day, I just hope that she also gets a bit of a promotion up the order and we see a lot more of such knocks because just a couple of such incisive batters and this Bangladesh side will definitely give other teams a run for their money. Fantastic performance, and like I said earlier, we've not even seen the best of her with the ball. So make no mistake, once she starts hitting the right straps over there, that's a fantastic all rounder that we're talking about over here.
Absolutely, Akshay. And I think even the fact that, she already has her name, high up there in the best strike rate so far in the tournament at 159, I think is just giving us an indication of where, potentially she will go and how important she'll be in that lower middle order too. And lastly, to I think sort of round off this list, because if given a chance to us, I think we'd just talk about a lot more performances. But for me, it has to be Sidra Amin, right? I think she's definitely been that fulcrum for Pakistan. We've spoken about her so much in the preview side of things, but I mean, this is a World Cup, right? You'd assume that, pressure would be a thing, but Sidra Amin is just such a beacon of hope for Pakistan, right? I think in all the matches that they've played so far, she has just held her ground, scored those crucial runs. I'm pretty sure people are going to come after me for the whole strike rate aspect and all of that, but this is already a crumbling Pakistan side. You see the batting really, really sort of, totter and not be able to put up runs. Yet you have a character like this, who's just batting it out there. I think she's been a massive, massive positive, not just in this World Cup, like even, for Pakistan in these past years. Just excited to see where she sort of goes in the match versus India, right? That gritty knock of 81. I use the word gritty because there were like literally no other batters besides her, and I think Natalia Purvis who even got to double figure scores. And at one point, you felt, hey, if Sidra really bats deep and she gets support from the other end, could things really have panned out differently? So I think yeah, Sidra is definitely one of the names to watch out for, and probably it's also like a jolt and a wake up call to the rest of the Pakistani batting lineup to actually just stand up and deliver and just play second fiddle, if not sort of complement her efforts. So I think we definitely should talk about Sidra.
100% we should be talking a lot more of her because we all know that she is going to be the mainstay for the Pakistani setup, especially with the bat in hand. And in such a high pressure situation against such a top opponent to come up with a performance like that, albeit in a losing cause. But once again, performances like these in situations like that, they go a long way in just building character, in also building confidence that you know what, I can do this against the best of opponents. Yeah, once again, with that Australia, the game against Australia, the batters did not really step up as well as they would have liked to. But we can only hope that they learn quickly and adapt as soon as possible, because the one major advantage that's going in Pakistan's favor is the schedule. They're going to be playing each of their 7 games in Colombo. None of the other sides have that advantage, and I really hope that they learn quickly about how these surfaces are going to play and use that to their advantage, and of course to their opposition's disadvantage. But yeah, that's that from the players that we felt weren't spoken about enough. There were plenty more to talk about, but unfortunately we had to prune the list. So these were the 5 names we stuck to: was Zalana King, Chloe Tryon, and then of course Charlie Dean, Rabia Khan, and last but not least Sidra. I mean, let's hope, fingers crossed, we'll get to see a lot more names being added to the list in the coming few weeks as well. But talking about what do we have next in store when it comes to the World Cup, Neha? क्या चल रहा है? What do we have?
I think Akshay, we have such an interesting roster of matches that sort of are going to unfold, right? Again, given an opportunity, we just take each of those matches and talk about it, because each of it has the potential to probably just capture our attention for the right reasons. I'm not going to state the obvious with the India Australia matches and all of that, but just look at the other encounters to sort of look forward to. I think Sri Lanka versus New Zealand too would be another mouth-watering encounter. New Zealand, clearly, the batting unit seems to be so overtly dependent on Sophie Devine, and they sort of crumble right at the sign of pressure. So I think Sri Lanka really can possibly pull off a win. Again, it's happening at Colombo, so funnier things have happened in cricket, and Sri Lanka can possibly do something like that. Even the England versus Pakistan game, for that matter, if Pakistan can, sort of really get England in a tough situation, we could see that. So basically, I think my answer is going to be all the subcontinent teams going against the likes of Australia, England, and New Zealand is going to be matches that we should look forward to. Not contrary to popular opinion, at least I think we would keep our eyes peeled out on these ones, Akshay.
100%. I mean, there's so many sort of exciting matchups to look forward to. Bangladesh versus South Africa is definitely going to a game to watch out for, because we saw, what England did to South Africa with their couple of spinners, left arm spinners to be precise, in Lindsay Smith and Sophie Eccleston. And talking about left arm spinners, Bangladesh have a dime a dozen, man. They've got so many available. They've got Nahida Akhtar, who's already doing well. They can easily bring in someone like a Sanjeeda Akhtar, who didn't do too badly versus England. Add to that Fahima Khatun's wrist spin, Rabia Khan's wrist spin if they want. They've also got Shorna Akhtar's Somaya Akhtar's offies if they need. So there's plenty of spin available. We saw how Vizag played in that India South Africa game. If it's going to be just as spin friendly, then make no mistake, Bangladesh will definitely try and weave a web of spin around the South African batters themselves. So that's going to be a fantastic game to watch out for. Sri Lanka, New Zealand, yet another game to watch out for, simply because of the fact that Sri Lanka haven't played in a while. Sure, they'll be playing England, but at the time of the recording, the last game versus Australia was unfortunately washed out, and they just played the tournament opener. So it's been, what, 10 days, more than 10 days since they last played at the time of the recording. They next play England, of course, and after that, next week, they will be playing New Zealand. That's going to be a very exciting game once again, and I really hope the Sri Lankan spinners come to the party over there. You saw what Inuka Ranavira did. We know Kavisha Dilhari can perform well. You've got the experience of Chamari Atapattu. They went ahead with Sugandhika Kumari last game. Do they stick to her? Do they bring in another pacer? Only time will tell, and I hope their batters somehow persevere. If they stay long enough, there's no reason why Sri Lanka can't win. So that'll be an exciting game to watch out for. England versus Pakistan, interesting game, because I don't know what to make of it. We saw England really stumble and stutter versus Bangladesh after a fantastic performance versus South Africa. And will they be able to bury the ghosts of that game so easily? I don't know. The Sri Lanka game would have happened before that, so we don't know how's that game going to pan out. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be very interesting, and fingers crossed, like we discussed over the course of the episode, if the subcontinent sides decide to step up, that'll be fantastic to watch. And this would potentially be one of those quote unquote upsets. We're all there. We all, here for such upsets, and hopefully we'll get to see a few of them as well. So Colombo, we are keeping an eye on New Sri Lanka versus Pakistan, England versus Pakistan. Beg your pardon. Sri Lanka versus New Zealand, England versus Pakistan. Two fantastic games to watch out for. Then we come back to India, to Vizag precisely, for the Australia Bangladesh game. That also, once again, Bangladesh is definitely one of the most, they have definitely one of the most informed bowling attacks right now. If that Australia Pakistan game was anything to go by, and once again, Bangladesh with their bowlers doing so well, if they can somehow manage to pick each of those 10 wickets, not 7, not 8, not 9, 10. You need to take 10 wickets. If they somehow do that, I really think the experience of Nigar Sultana Jyoti, the sort of advantage of Sharmeen Akhtar Shukla and Sobna Musri of having scored a few runs right now, along with Rabia Khan, I really think that batting lineup is a lot more potent than say Pakistan, which means they could put up a much bigger fight versus Australia. So fingers crossed, Bangladesh. You've got at least one fan rooting for you seated in Bangalore. So let's hope that you do well. Coming back, of course, or rather going back, of course, to Sri Lanka for the final two games of the next week. Sri Lanka take on South Africa and New Zealand take on Pakistan. Once again, two exciting encounters simply because each of these sides have their flaws. Each of these sides have struggled against spin so far. Each of these sides have struggled with strike rate so far. South Africa, if not for that last minute heist from Nadine Klerk and Chloe Town, would have lost that game. We know the way they performed versus England, so it's definitely not going to be easy against superior spin attacks. And there's been a lot of conversations around how Indian spinners themselves haven't been at the best of their abilities. Barring Sneha, maybe Deepti Sharma has not performed as well with the ball as they would have liked her to. And then you've got Sri Charni, who's still sort of learning the tips of the trade, at the biggest stage. So that's where Sri Lanka, with their experienced spinners, Pakistan with their experienced spinners, can really spin a web or two. We saw what Pakistan did to Australia. There's absolutely no reason why they can or can't do this to their transisment rivals, New Zealand. And unfortunately or fortunately, New Zealand's batters, they haven't turned up to the party yet. We saw the way they performed versus Australia. We saw the way they performed versus South Africa. If not for Sophie Devine's pyrotechnics in both those games, I don't think they would have fared. They would have done any better. So, which is why, if they are able to restrict, New Zealand to a subpar total, boy oh boy, are we in for a fantastic next week, Neha.
Absolutely, Akshay. I think we would, really be looking forward to that sort of a match, right? Because I think so far we have seen the subcontinent teams really punch above their weight, actually challenge the, big wigs. But I think registering a win would really, change the entire dynamic and how other teams, would actually acknowledge and possibly even tour them in the future. So yeah, definitely just keeping my eyes peeled out for that, and hopefully we get to see that sort of an underdog story or upsets on cards. Yeah.
Fingers crossed, and like we said, it's going to be a fantastic week. At the time of the recording, Bangladesh are playing New Zealand. New Zealand in a spot of bother right now, 45 for 3. They've lost each of their top three, including Amelia Kerr, Susie Bates, and Georgia Plummer. And yeah, it's going to be a fantastic game to watch out for. Of course, by the time the episode drops, we would know the result. The Sri Lanka England game would be in progress by then. Neha, any parting thoughts before we wrap up today's episode?
Yeah, actually, I think it's been a really fun World Cup so far. Again, much against public opinion who wanted, like absolute run feast and a lot of runs on offer. I think a lot of us have really enjoyed, and just whatever the World Cup has thrown up has really, just kept us captivated. I hope the World Cup continues to deliver in that regard. And yeah, now that I think, all the predictions that we sort of made pre-World Cup might really not end up, that way. So yeah, we'll again have to wipe off all the ethically sourced eggs from our face. But yeah, hopefully, we still get to see a World Cup that's interesting and a top four finish that really, sort of shocks us.
Completely agree with you there. In fact, I remember seeing this somewhere. I'm forgetting where this was. What did I see? But so there, it was one of these models, AI models, predicting the top four. So based on the game so far, the top four had Bangladesh, South Africa, Australia, and England. I was like, wow. If that actually ends up being the final top four, wow, wow. It'll be fantastic to watch that. But I guess that's that from this episode of the Women's Cricket Podcast. Neha, before we wrap it up, about the Senior Women's T20 Trophy itself, is there anything we want to talk about? I know it's the World Cup. We've not had enough time to follow it extensively. There's no footage, of course, so we just have to check the scorecards out. But Haryana, Tripura, Karnataka, Andhra, there have been a couple of interesting games so far.
Yeah, Akshay, I'm really glad we are actually talking about the domestic side of things because it largely goes unnoticed when you have a massive event like the World Cup itself that's happening. So far, like whatever I have observed, the senior women's T20 trophy has been divided into the elite and the plate version. Uh, at the risk of sounding like that person, I really think the plate division is very exclusionary, right? Because it just has the six teams who have continued to be at the bottom of the table in the past edition. So it's just, the Northeast teams playing against each other. Day one matches got washed off. Day two had, some matches on offer, but again, low scoring matches and not a lot to discuss in that regard. But in the elite division, Karnataka seems to have gotten off on a good footing, playing under the captaincy of Nikki Prasad. And I think the Indian cricket team on like Instagram too had released a video of how she was a part of a captain's workshop and all of that. So yeah, possible signs of a future captain. Karnataka, registering two wins too. More recently versus Andhra, where we saw Shriyanka Patil also, sort of play there. So that's been an interesting one. And as for other teams, yeah, I think you have the usual suspects in Haryana doing really well. Shifali Verma captaining them in the first match versus Tripura, scoring that 70. Priya Punya playing for Delhi also, amongst the runs. So far, yeah, the tournament is shaping up really well. The fact that there's like 15 matches happening there can be a tad overwhelming to follow, but I know we are just doing our best. The only sad part is that these matches are not getting streamed, so it's literally just referring to scorecards and sort of making your deductions. I'm sure even a couple of WPL scouts would be kind of excited, and they'd be just looking forward to seeing some of the matches unfold and possibly recruit some new players as well. I think even the Bengal Madhya Pradesh match that happened on day one was interesting. Sanskriti Gupta, pulling off that sort of a cameo, but just yeah, a lot of matches happening and some very interesting performances. But yeah, just so far, 2 days of cricket have happened and a lot of matches to talk about.
And going through the scorecards, I remember Madhya Pradesh also retired someone out, right? While chasing, and that's when Sanskriti Gupta came in and scored a couple of boundaries, needing 11 of the last over. Correct me if I'm wrong, there.
Yes, Akshay, correct. It was that sort of a situation. And also in the match that Kerala played, right? I can't remember the opposition. Asha Shobna too, right? Scored 60 or Sajna, captaining them. So that was an interesting one. And another update that I wanted to share with you was Shika Pandey is now playing for Baroda, okay? And this is an update I didn't see coming. I thought she'd continue plying her trade for, Goa. But yeah, Baroda clearly seems to have been bolstered by her presence. Don't see Pooja Vastrikar anywhere in those lineups and so I think she's still possibly injured, like not her in Baroda setup, but like anywhere in those scorecards. Don't remember seeing Pooja Vastrakar. But yeah, Disha Kasat, so many names, just names you're used to seeing being in those scorecards is really nice. And yeah, let's just keep our fingers crossed that the senior women's T20 like elite and plate division continues to deliver.
Yeah, 100% agree with you there. In fact, that Kerala game was versus Vidarbha, where Sajna and Asha Shobna, both of them scored tons at number 4 and number 5. Importantly, Bharti Fulmuli also did well for Vidarbha in the same game, 46 of 32. That strike rate is what excites me because she was definitely a player I enjoyed watching last season. So hopefully we'll see a lot more games being played by her. But would she be retained by the Gujarat Giants? Only time will tell. And like we said up top, we will be talking about WPL, the auction, and all of those things in one of our future episodes after the World Cup. I guess that's that from this episode. Finally, after two false starts, like they say, third time's the charm. So hopefully this time, third time is the charm, not just for us, but even for the side we support, hopefully. But until then, it's a goodbye from both of us. Thank you so much for tuning in. Like always, please make sure you hit the like button if you haven't already. Until then, it's a goodbye. Take care. Bye bye.